Thanks for attending the Planning Committee on Tuesday the 7th of December 2021. My name's Councillor June Molyneux and I'm the Chair of the Committee, Alex Hilton's Vice Chair. Please note the committee is being streamed live on YouTube with public speakers joining via Microsoft Teams. If you've joined the call because you're a member of the public who has registered to speak, please note you do have a time limit of up to 3 minutes. If you're calling on a phone, you'll need to press *6 to unmute your device when invited to speak. The legal officer will operate a stopwatch and confirm when your time runs out. You should then finish, or if in the middle of making a point, wind up within a few seconds and finish speaking. Otherwise, your microphone will be muted. For ease, a pack has been prepared which contains the report, plans, presentation slides and any addendum for each item to ensure everyone can easily follow the agenda. This is available online. After officers have presented the report and any speakers have made their representations, I'll invite members to make any comments. When you want to speak, please raise your hand to indicate to me that you wish to speak. When I invite you to speak, please turn on your microphone and switch it off when you finish speaking. When speaking, please reference the paragraph number to enable everyone to follow you. If technology fails, then I'll adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issue. And if this is not possible, a new date and turn will be organised. With that, move on to the agenda. Apologies.
We have apologies from Councillor Aaron Beaver, who's been substituted by Councillor Karen Derbyshire. Apologies from Councillor Peter Gabbett, with Councillor James Nevitt substituting, and Councillor Keith Idden sending apologies.
Okay, thank you. Item 1, the minutes of the meeting Tuesday the 9th of November, pages 3 to 4 in your pack. Can somebody move those minutes, please? Thank you, Councillor Marwood. Thank you, Councillor France. That's proposed and seconded. All those in favour, use the voting system. I got you then. Okay. Everybody voted? Yeah. So everybody's voted. Approve those minutes. Thank you. Have I got any declarations of interest? Item 2, please. Councillor Hilton.
Yeah, I'd like to declare an interest in item 3A. I live very, very close to this development, and I've also got some ongoing casework, so I'll leave the chamber when this is being discussed. Thank you.
Okay. Item 3, planning applications to be determined. They've submitted 8 items for us to determine tonight. For the benefit of the public here tonight, the speaking arrangements for planning applications as follows. Officers will summarise the report and registered speakers will be allowed to speak in the following order: objector, supporter, parish or town councillor, ward councillor, applicant or agent. All registered speakers will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes, apart from a ward councillor who may speak for up to 5 minutes. In the event that all speakers are against an application, as chair, I'll grant the applicant or representative a time extension. And I would respectfully ask members of the public who have not registered to speak to remain quiet throughout the proceedings. We're going to change the agenda slightly. I'm going to do item 3D and 3A at the end. So we're going to start with item 3B. B, we're going to start with B. Okay. Right. So item 3B, pages are stuck together, is the Village Hall, Chapel Lane, Coppull, pages 43 to 64, with an update on your addendum, and the recommendation remains the same. Ian's going to present this item. Planning permission is granted subject to conditions. I've no registered speakers. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of a building to provide a nursery and community meeting facilities following the demolition of the existing village hall at Coppull. The application site comprises a building of traditional design style positioned between buildings in a predominantly residential area. The proposed building will be a 2-storey structure resembling a large dwelling and would support the same uses as are currently accommodated on the site, and it is therefore acceptable in principle. Although the proposed building will be of a distinctly different design, character and appearance to the existing one, it would reflect the characteristics of the area and will be of a similar scale to the adjacent buildings. There will be no unacceptable impact on residential amenity over and above that of the existing building, given the degree of separation that will be maintained. It's noted that there would be an inadequate level of off-street car parking provision. However, there's currently no parking provision at all at the existing facility, which is located in a sustainable area within adequate walking distances of surrounding residential development. As such, it's not considered that there will be any undue impact on highway amenity as a result of the proposed development. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out on the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Over to you, members. Councillor Heaton.
I'd move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Boardman. Oh, we're in a hurry. Councillor Hilton.
Thank you. This is obviously my ward. Coppul's an expanding, vibrant and active community, and this village hall will give it a valuable resource for the community moving forward. So I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more comments? Councillor Marwood.
Just a quick one, just to show that we do think about it. As it's been pointed out, the current one sort of stands out like a bit of a sore thumb. No parking, so this can only be an improvement. So happy to go with the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wish to make any comment? If not, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the officer recommendation, please vote. Press your green button. Okay, Taz?
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to grant planning permission subject to conditions in respect of the erection of building to provide nursery and community facilities following demolition of existing village hall at the village hall 47 Chapel Lane. Thank you.
Thanks, Taz. Moving on, item 3C, land adjacent to Harbour Barn, Harbour Lane, Wheelton, pages 65 to 86. Adele's going to present this item. I've two registered speakers, the ward councillor, Councillor Margaret Krantz, and the applicant, the agent, Michael Moore, who's joining via Teams. Michael, can you hear and speak?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent, thank you. Adele's going to present this item. Okay, Adele?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
This application proposes an equestrian development comprising a stable block, a sand paddock, areas of hard standing and a new vehicular access to Harbour Lane. The application follows on from a previously refused application earlier in the year for a similar development, although the stables have been reduced in size and a new access is proposed. The site is considered to be greenfield and is comprised of open agricultural land, a field gate and the dilapidated remains of a former barn. The local planning authority has no evidence to suggest that the site actually has a lawful equestrian use, nor has this been demonstrated through the current planning application or indeed the previous application at the site. The site falls wholly within the Greenbelt, and as members of the committee will be aware, for development to be considered appropriate development in the Greenbelt, it must satisfactorily fall within the exceptions set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. Although stables can be considered to be an appropriate facility for outdoor sport and recreation, the key test of the framework is that the facilities must preserve the openness of the Greenbelt and not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. The officer report provides a detailed assessment for you and concludes that whilst there is a dilapidated building on the site, this is not overly prominent and the proposed stable building would have a much greater spatial and visual presence. Consequently, it would be more harmful to the openness of the Greenbelt than the current situation, and openness would not be preserved. In addition, the development would result in incursion of built form into the countryside, which conflicts with the third purpose of the Greenbelt as set out in the framework. In respect of the other forms of development proposed in the application, namely the access, sand paddock and hard standing areas, these are engineering operations which are set out as an exception under the provisions of the framework, again provided that they preserve openness of the Greenbelt and do not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. The officer report considers that whilst their impact on openness is low, they do result in incursion of development onto a predominantly undeveloped site, which results in encroachment into the countryside. Notwithstanding this, the associated development of perimeter fencing to the sand paddock and winter turnout also impacts openness, in addition to the parking of vehicles, horse boxes and other equestrian paraphernalia. When assessing the proposed development as a whole, it's considered that the openness of the green belt would not be preserved and encroachment into the countryside would also occur. The proposal is therefore quite clearly inappropriate development in the green belt. The framework is clear that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Substantial weight is given to any harm to the green belt, and very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Members should note that no very special circumstances have been advanced by the applicant, nor have they been identified by the local planning authority. In terms of other consideration, the proposal is in accordance with the Rural Development SPD and Chorley local plan policies in respect of amenity and highway safety. I'm mindful that the applicant has provided some photographs of the current state of the land, but I would remind members that the current state of land does not in itself warrant to be considered as very special circumstances, and there are other powers and provisions for the local planning authority to ensure that the material that is currently in situ is removed through formal enforcement procedures, namely a Section 215 notice. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you everybody, and thanks for letting me come to speak. Most of you know me well enough to know that this is my 8th year now as a borough councillor, and I feel like I've kind of crossed sides. It's the first time I've ever come before the planning to actually speak in support of an application like this on the Greenbelt side. And the reasons for this are, quite a lot of them are set out in this report actually, because having read through it in detail, I have to say, there is a lot more explanation about why this should be allowed than why it should be refused. In comparison with the previous application, all of the issues have been addressed with the exception of the the permitted, not suitable development in the green belt. And I think I have to say, I visited this site earlier this year together with the applicant and had a look at it, and it was in a very poor state of preserve, insofar as there were ruins of an old building there, lots of rubble, lots of stone on the ground, ruins of a timber building, and it was an eyesore, to be perfectly honest. And looking at the plots all around them, virtually every one has a stable, a sand paddock, or what have you on it. You've got a sole objection there from a previous neighbour who lived at Harbour Barn, who lives there no longer, who's objected, and he quoted in his objection that there was a stables directly across from him, as indeed there are stables and sand paddocks on lots of those, lots of land going along Harbour Lane. So yes, it's greenbelt land, but most land in the greenbelt is managed in some shape or form or other, and we've said that using land for recreational use and exercise is acceptable within the terms of the SDP. So I find myself a bit bewildered, really. I think the only thing we're looking at here in reality is this unacceptable development within the green belt, and is it because of its visual effect on the openness of the green belt? And if that is the case, then I'd like to work with the officer to see what we can do about it. Because from memory, standing in the middle of that field, there is quite a large wooden barn in the adjoining field. So if members have a mind to refuse this application, would that change if the stables could be removed so they were immediately in the sight line of the existing building? I think that would have a great deal less impact on the openness of the green belt. But ironically, it would lose more of the grass, I think, by setting it further back in terms of access. So Mr. Marshall impressed me, Mr. Moore impressed me as a guy who is not trying to build a tall stable for tall horses who will later want to put in an application for a change of use to a house. Neither is he trying to open the riding stables and make a lot of money. It is simply a chap who wants to make best use of this land and put his own horses on it. So I, for one, would support him. I think the actual overall effect on the openness of the Greenbelt would not be extensive. There are a lot of small buildings of this nature along Harbour Lane, either side, and it would bring it back into use. It would tidy it up. And for most people in the village, I think they would welcome it from what has been really quite an eyesore. So that's about it, really. Thank you.
Yes, I just want to remind members that you can only really consider what is before you in the current application, not an alternative proposal. That's all I wanted to say at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Michael, would you like to speak now, please?
Yes, please. Okay, Margaret's touched on the derelict mess and what have you that was left there. The land has previously been used for equestrian use. There was a lady from the village who her uncle owned the land. She kept her horses on there for a few years. Andrew, the gentleman I bought the land off, he kept his wife's ponies on there quite a few years ago. And he also used it for breeding rabbits and whatnot. We're planting lots of trees. We're going to gap up any bits on the hedgerow. The hedge between the land and the road is in a bit of a sorry state. So we've bought 500 hawthorn hedge plants that we've already started planting. The footpath that runs down the side of the land, the people I speak to who walk along there are really, really happy that somebody's taken over this derelict bit of land and is tidying it up. We just want to keep it pretty. We want to preserve the openness of the Greenbelt. Both my wife and my kids were all live in Blainscough. The main draw for me to buy that land was that it's so close to where I live. We had thought about buying a house with land. We couldn't afford that. This was the next best thing, to have somewhere that's in 3 minutes walking distance from where we live. And we can keep our pets close by, and we just want to build our stables and enjoy it and look after it. So that's pretty much all I've got to say.
Okay, thanks. Over to you, members. I've got Councillor Boardman, Councillor Hilton so far. Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How can they call you mayor then for a minute again? No. Yeah, I have sympathy for the applicant. Buying a plot of land is an expensive pastime, and especially if you've got your heart set on using it for something that is incidental and ancillary to your family. However, but the national policies and our local policies are really clear on pieces of open Greenbelt land in the Greenbelt. I think Adele summarised it, but the report details it quite thoroughly. Although equestrian use might have been on that land previously, it's not a continuous equestrian use. There's no current horses on that land. Therefore, I don't see how I can sit here and justify the use of a stable on it. That being said, yes, the land is an eyesore. I'm not disputing that. We've got some photographs here to show us. But the land can quite easily be tidied up. So it's not an eyesore. That's a very simple task and doesn't require any planning permissions. The issue here for us is if we let these applications come forward and we approve these applications, we are setting a very dangerous precedent. There's nothing to stop us, other applicants who own pieces of land on that lane or the lanes within the borough, to do exactly the same thing. We all know the situation with stabling. Stabling for the right use is very useful and can be used as stable for years and years and years. However, we do see them converted in 10, 12 years' time after they've gone up. I'm not saying that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at a stable application. But my concern would be setting a dangerous precedent of building in the Greenbelt. I put on here, yes, basically the state of the land. I think it just needs tidying up, but I think it's unfortunate, but I will, for the applicant, but I'll support the officer's recommendation.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that Martin's just said then. I don't believe there are any special circumstances demonstrate that outweigh the harm to the Greenbelt here. Yeah, the land is an eyesore, but the land can be cleared up. We agreed to build on Greenbelt that's an eyesore because it's an eyesore. We're going to get eyesores popping up all over Chorley in the Greenbelt, and that's not a route I want to go down. So I'm quite happy to recommend the proposal for office recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor France.
Thank you. I know this site quite well. I would like to propose a site visit because, listen to what Councillor Boardman said, what Councillor Wheelton said, there already has been a number of precedents in this area because there are a number of stables very close to this one. And when I say very close, as the lady, the objector said, there's one directly across the road. Now, on goodness sake, did that get planning permission? Because it's relatively recent. So I think members need to go and have a look at this. This is just my opinion, so I'd like to propose a site visit, please.
Yeah, just to provide some clarity on previous decisions, the stable block on the opposite side of Harbour farm was actually approved in 2009 under a completely different planning policy regime. There's also a sand paddock on School Lane around the corner, and again, very special circumstances were advanced in support of that proposal, and it was justified under the provisions of the framework on the grounds of enhancing opportunities for sport and recreation, and they are less harmful to openness than buildings. So just for clarity, just so that members are aware of the history to those previous consents.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just off the back of that, I'd reiterate what Adele said earlier about we have to consider what's in this application, not a broader context around the land around it. I'd appreciate nobody understands the site better than ward councillors, and you know, members of this committee would be foolish to suggest otherwise. That being said, I'd absolutely second everything that Councillor Boardman said off the back of Adele's recommendations. I'd be very concerned about a particular encroachment into the countryside here, inappropriate development in Greenbelt, particularly as Adele mentioned, the parking of horse boxes and vehicles. We are, with this application, we would be seeing a clear shift in the way this land's used and the way it's presented. We have to consider the precedent this would set in terms of allowing vehicles to park in the countryside. And again, I'd reiterate a lot of the points that have already been mentioned about the tidiness of the site. Looking at the pictures provided here, I can think of various places in the Greenbelt in Chorley that sadly look like this at the moment. That doesn't justify inappropriate development on them. And I'd agree with Councillor Hilton that there are methods outside of planning that we can use to clean up these areas. And I think the ward members would like to see this area improved. I think I'd very much support them in that. Nevertheless, I don't think this application is the right means to do that. So I'd support approving the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Heaton, then Councillor Whitaker.
I was going to second the officer's recommendation, but it's third in it now. But already been done. Thank you.
Councillor Whitaker.
Thanks, Chair. I think I've read it correctly, but I'm looking at paragraph 44, which is the impact on amenity. And it seems to say, and I acknowledge the comments that were made by Councillor Boardman and Councillor Vice Chair. It says it's separated from residential development to avoid any adverse amenity impacts, and it is proposed as a private development as opposed to a commercial stables or riding school, which presumably would have some impact on the amenity of residents. I assume that that's what it means. It says the proposed equestrian use is also compatible with surrounding land uses and is a typical rural use, which of course it is. The proposal would accord with Chorley Local Plan BNE 1 in respect of amenity considerations. So that suggests that it's okay. But if I've read it correctly, I acknowledge the concerns made by Councillor Boardman and Councillor Hilton, but if you're looking for, you know, I don't know the site at all, but I'll see what other members say about a site visit or have a look at it, because I think it's important to get this one right. Okay, thanks, Chair.
And then it's Councillor
Yeah.
Derbyshire.
Just to clarify the method of assessment for a proposal in the Greenbelt, essentially it's a two-step process, if you like. We have to consider the acceptability in principle of the development, and if we conclude that there is harm to the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness, then that's quite a simple assessment, if you like. However, we also then need to move on to actually assess whether there's any other harm that also weighs in the planning balance. So in this instance, what the report is setting out for members is that there is harm by reason of inappropriateness because the building isn't an exception to development in the Greenbelt, but there isn't any other harm in respect of amenity considerations because of the degree of separation from residential properties. If the building would have been slap bang up to somebody's house, then there may have been some other identifiable harm. But the fact that there's no residential amenity impacts doesn't negate or override the in principle argument that is set out under the provisions of the framework. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry. I'm tended to agree with the ward councillors and be advised with the ward councillors here, and the fact that it's not going to stand out. I know it's inappropriate. It says that word inappropriate. I think that's very, I know it's a sort of planning term and that's suggested, but for it to be no different, for it to not be any change really, apart from another building on a site where there's already things, I'm tended to go with the ward councillors actually and say that I think we should grant planning permission for it, because it seems like nitpicking. Sorry.
On the contrary, this is not at all nitpicking. This is a clear policy. It's been clearly defined. It's been well documented, and the speakers this evening have explained why you cannot build it in the Greenbelt. There's no special circumstances because it's untidy, isn't special. It can be cleared, and then that's another matter. Again, giving planning permission as a slippery slope if you give it. Again, it's been said already, so I'm not going to dwell on that. So, and as for a site visit, we serve no purpose. We know it's untidy. We've already said that's nothing to do with it. We know there are similar stables, etc. Under a different policy, things are much tighter now. So I see no reason for a site visit at all. Thank you.
Sorry, have you lost the sound, or have I lost the sound?
Sorry,
I can hear you.
it was my fault. No, we can't see the voting thing now. I had voted. Oh, sorry. I had, because the numbers had stayed the same. Wasn't me. Okay, Taz.
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to refuse planning permission in respect of land adjacent to Harbour Barn, Harbour Lane, for the following reason. The proposed development is inappropriate development in the green belt, which is harmful by definition. It fails to preserve the openness of the green belt and conflicts with the third purpose of the green belt due to encroachment into the countryside. Substantial weight is attached to this harm. No very special circumstances have been put forward by the applicant, nor have any been identified by the local planning authority to outweigh this harm. The proposal is therefore considered contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework at Chapter 13. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Now, we can do item D now. Anybody wish to leave? Councillor France, please feel free. So we can do item D. Let me find it. I'm being really efficient. Which is, I'm going to find my place. Land adjacent to Wigan Lane, Wigan Lodge, Wigan Lane, Chorley, pages 87 to 96. Adele's going to present this item, and the application is for a certificate of lawfulness for any refusal. I have two registered speakers: the ward councillor, Councillor Bradley, and the applicant, agent David Balby. Right, David, can you hear and speak?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, Adele, can you present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The application site is located within the green belt, again as defined by Chorley Local Plan Policies Map. It comprises an area of land that was historically associated with the adjacent Wigan Lodge, which is a Grade 2 listed building, but has been segregated to form an independent parcel of land. The trees within the site are protected under a tree preservation order, and it's actually a woodland grouping. Members are advised that a certificate of lawful use has been granted previously to confirm that on the balance of probabilities, the land has been used for recreational purposes. The application before members this evening has been submitted under the provisions of Section 191 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, which seeks confirmation that units which comply with the requirements of the Caravan Sites and Control of Development Act 1960, 1968, 2006 and 2006 amendments in terms of their design, mobility, size and construction are permitted on the land for recreational purposes. Section 191 of the Act allows for any person to ascertain whether an existing use of land is lawful. For the purposes of the Planning Act, uses and operations are lawful if no enforcement action may be taken in respect of them, whether because they did not involve development or require planning permission, or because the time for enforcement action has expired, or for any other reason. Applications must contain evidence to verify the information included in the application, and this must be relevant, clear and unambiguous. The onus of proof rests firmly with the applicant and not with the local planning authority. Members will be mindful that the officer report sets out in particular that the application is confusing, as the certificate relates to an existing use, but the supporting information refers to potential future state of affairs, i.e. the continuing recreational use of the site, albeit including the siting of a mobile home twin unit, and this is actually set out in the supporting evidence. No information has been submitted to demonstrate that the caravans are used for purposes consistent with the lawful use of the land. And in the absence of sufficiently precise and unambiguous evidence, the local planning authority is unable to confirm on the balance of probabilities that a material change of use has not actually occurred. It is therefore recommended that the application is refused for the reasons set out in the main report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair, and I hope you can hear me. Thank you, members. I'm here to speak in support of residents of this area in refusing this application as the officer's recommendation. And as officers point out in the report, this is a woodland site that has something of a history of creeping intensification. I have personally spoken at Planning Committee previously regarding applications for fencing, gates, etc., which would have changed the nature of this site, and I believe that this certificate of lawful use would also do similar. There have been repeated reports of storage of building materials on the site and non-recreational uses of the site and other activities. And I believe that and residents believe that this application seeks to further alter the definition of this land use. There is already, as officers have pointed out, an accepted use as a recreational site. but the siting of two mobile homes is very different. We're all well aware, I think, members of the Planning Committee particularly, of touring caravans, the difference between touring caravans that tour, mobile homes and static caravans that possibly don't tour, and there is a tortuous and complex history in Chorley of sites of that sort coming forward with all kinds of implications. Therefore, Chair, I would recommend that, or I would ask that members support the recommendations from officers and also support the long-term residents of this area in supporting the refusal of this certificate of lawful use, the very excellent reasons stated in the report, and also to prevent the further erosion of our green woodland spaces and not open them up to further intensification and development, which this would surely do. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bradley. David, would you like to speak now?
I've not got a very good signal. Yeah, the application is not ambiguous at all. The request is very specific in the words of the proposal. I'm just asking that I've got permission to use my caravans on the land. There's been two caravans on the land for about 2 years now. The councillor more than aware that I've got them there, and as the councillor just said, you know, as are the residents. And this is acknowledged in section 23 of the proposal. So I'm not hiding that I've got caravans on there. If the caravans weren't allowed, then I would have been told to remove them by the council enforcement team now. So therefore, they are allowed. It's been 2 years. I just want to take off the two items that I've got on there. They're getting a little bit tatty now. I want to put a newer one on. But before I spend good money, I thought I'd like a formal piece of paper so that if anyone asks, I can show them that everything is okay and within the law. I've asked the council informally, but I've been ignored, hence I'm asking officially now. Nothing's changed, otherwise I'm swapping a caravan stroke mobile home for a much nicer one. I haven't decided what model, even if I go for a big one. As long as it's still a caravan, I can have a caravan. The council statement in section 24 is invalid. A caravan is a caravan. Nothing's changing. I'm already got them, and they've been there 2 years. And this business that they're saying, the council's section 25, that I haven't proven that a material change of use hasn't occurred, it's totally unfounded. The fact that I haven't received any enforcement for the breach of the use is evidence enough that the material change of use has not occurred. I'm using it for leisure use. You know, the fact that I've not been asked to remove the caravans in 2 years says that they're allowed. I'm just asking for a formality, a certificate. You know, the land's used by myself, my wife, my kids, my grandkids. It's just a nice big garden. We use it to play. We've got barbecues, we play football, we've got rope swing, we let the dogs run round. You know, we use the caravan to wash pots after a barbecue. You know, we're in COVID now. I let the kids have a wash in there, and if they want to go to the toilet, they can go to the toilet. You know, I can't have kids nipping into the trees to have a wee. You know, I've got small kids. Just don't see why you'd want to reject it. Nothing's changing. I've got 2 caravans on there. They've been there 2 years. Councillor Holgate's been up. I've met him up there. He's seen the land himself. He knows what I'm doing on there. It's just a nice garden. You know, I don't see what. I just want a piece of paper to say, yeah, you can have the caravan before I spend good money on making it nicer. You know, you've not had me take the caravans off. They're fine. I just want to make it nicer. But I don't know what to say. I thought it would just be a formality. You know, but here we are. What else can I say about it? You know, I just use it with my kids and my grandkids. I think the residents think that I'm some kind of gypsy and they really don't like me. But that's just not true. I've lived in all my life, you know, and that's the land. So I really can't say anything more. It's just a caravan for a caravan. You know, you can't make me take it off. You haven't made me take it off. I'm not in any breaches, and I've been using it as leisure use. Otherwise, you would have been.
Okay, David, can you wind up now, please?
If I do something.
Thank you.
If I do something silly.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Okay. Right. Over to you, members. Councillor Heaton.
Council.
Yeah, could I second Councillor Heaton's suggestion that we support the officer's recommendation I do sympathise with the applicant. I'd just suggest the lack of enforcement is not evidence enough that the land is being used properly. He should have supplied that evidence in the first place. I sympathise that sometimes planning applications can be quite complicated, but as Adele rightly stated, the onus is on the applicant to provide that evidence. The applicant might want to go away and submit an application that does provide sufficient evidence for this committee to make a different decision. Thank you.
I have voted. I don't press, obviously don't press hard enough. Okay, Taz?
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to refuse the application for certificate of lawfulness for an existing use for the following reason. The information contained within the application is not sufficiently precise and unambiguous. Chorley Council, as a local planning authority, is not satisfied that on the balance of probabilities, a material change of use of the land, as shown on the submitted location plan, has not occurred. The use as described is not therefore proven to be lawful within the meaning of Section 191 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. If you wish to go now, Councillor Bradley, you can. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Item 3E, land south of Red Bank Scout up Little Carr Lane, Chorley, pages 97 to 110. Adele's going to present this item. I have one registered speaker, the objector, Laura Daniels, who's joining us on Teams. Laura, can you hear and speak?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent. Adele, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application relates to an area of land located to the south of Red Bank Scout Hut on Little Carr Lane. The land was formerly occupied by a pumping station and is accessed from Melrose Way. A mature tree belt lies adjacent to the site. The application seeks planning permission retrospectively for the use of the site for Class B2 and B8 activities between the hours of 8:30 in the morning and 4:45 in the afternoon, Monday to Friday. 5 letters of objection have been received raising issues relating to reduction in privacy to the neighbouring dwellings, highway safety due to vehicles being parked on the road, the site being directly adjacent to residential dwellings, antisocial hours of operation, and that the site is being used as a dumping ground. No objections have been raised by LCC Highways or the Council's own regulatory services. The site lies in the settlement area of Chorley and is located opposite a large commercial building that it would be associated with. It would therefore not be out of keeping with the surrounding area. Whilst the site is directly adjacent to residential dwellings, the hours of operation have been reduced significantly since the application was originally submitted through negotiations with the applicant and the case officer, and the proposed use would only now be in operation during weekdays for the hours I mentioned at the beginning, when general background noise would be at its greatest in any event. Furthermore, the applicant has proposed acoustic fencing and planting to the site boundary to reduce noise transmission and issues of privacy. It is therefore not considered that the proposal would result in detrimental impact on neighbouring dwellings, and the application is recommended for approval subject to appropriate conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Adele. Laura, do you want to speak now, please?
Yeah, just for the concern we have as neighbours, it's very clear that the site that they are using is too small for the amount of vehicles that they do have. The vehicles go all the way down the road to the back of their house. You've got an average of at least 5 large vans and trucks that are parked there overnight. At the moment, I've currently got a large truck that is parked right at my back gate. I open my back gate into a large truck, and that truck has been parked there. It hasn't moved for 8 days at the moment. It's not moved at all. The van is twice as tall as our fence, so we look out and all we can see is the van. The van at the moment is currently slightly open, and you can see what looks like household rubbish, an old mattress hanging out the back of the van. There's another van in there at the moment that's full of household rubbish.
the noise at the moment is all times and days. I can see that they've noted that they will change the times, but my concern with that is that the vans and trucks that are along the road are used and they're used and they're also fixed. I think they're using it as some kind of repair shop. All that goes on the actual road as well as from the site. So my main concern with the timing is that the timing for all the vehicles along the road as well as the site. It's the noise from the repair shop. Obviously, we can hear it in all of our houses. The commercial building that you're saying is along the back of the property, that isn't associated with it. And I just want to note that with that commercial building, it doesn't cause any bother to anybody. There's no noise. There's no trucks parking up the back of our houses. It's all internal. That commercial building is just a building. It doesn't cause any issues for anybody. So I wouldn't say it's associated with it or fits in with it at all. We have our seating areas at the back of our gardens, and we sit there and there's just a van at the side of us. It's literally at the side of our fences. There's rubbish and oil on the floor. I know a lot of our neighbours have complained in the past about the rubbish and the oil. So yeah, I just wanted to just let you know that it is a nuisance and an eyesore to myself and our neighbours. And it is very clear to me and to anybody that drives past that the site isn't big enough for the vehicles and for the work that the company are doing. That's all, thank you.
Okay, thanks. It's over to you, members. Councillor France, Councillor Heaton, Councillor Boardman.
Yeah, I've just slight concerns looking at paragraphs 25 and 26. After what the residents said, it sounds as though the site isn't big enough if vehicles are being parked on the road for 4, 5, 6, 7 days. Then obviously highways have assessed the application and have raised no objections, but you know, in the past they've not been out to look at sites, and obviously there can be problems there that aren't seen. So I just have slight concerns with this, just on highway safety issues.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a great fan of site visits, but I don't know this site that well. I'd like to suggest we have a site visit and have a look at the place and just see what the loss of amenity to the neighbour is, really.
When the apartment block went up, and clearly is still a pumping station because we haven't actually voted it through to change of use yet. It does look awfully close to the apartment block, and the site is currently being used, hence why the application is retrospective. There does seem to be quite a bit of junk and debris on the site. So I would also like to have a site visit, so I'll second Councillor Heaton for a site visit on this one, which I don't normally do.
Thanks, Chair. Can Adele please specify for me what B2 and B8 is?
Through you, Chair, I can indeed, Councillor Whittaker. Class B2 is a general industrial use set out in the Use Classes Order provisions of 1987 as subsequently amended, and B8 is for storage and distribution.
Storage and distribution?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think myself and Councillor Heaton are linked by telepathy tonight, but yeah, I definitely support a site visit just so that we can make a clearer assessment of this. Looking at paragraphs 21 and 26, they seem to reinforce the residents' concerns about this. Paragraph 21 suggesting a number of manoeuvres is needed to access the site. That suggests to me that actually access is currently unsafe, and it would support what the residents saying about the number of vehicles needing to use this site. Paragraph 26, it's not often we'll get something from LCC Highways that says actually concerns have been raised, and while they don't have any particular issues, you know, to have those there definitely means something. So I think we should we should definitely visit. It's a complicated application. The conditions attached would improve the situation as it is currently in terms of the acoustic fencing, in terms of ability to enforce particular opening times. But I'd just like to close with a question for Adele. Have we got any enforcement issues that have been flagged at this property?
I thought it was something that you wanted me to go away and consider when you said it was closing. No, not that I'm aware of. And we've also liaised with colleagues in the council's environmental protection team, and they haven't informed us of any statutory noise nuisance complaints. And I always say to residents, if they are experiencing something that they feel is a statutory nuisance, then it's very important that we receive the complaints so that we've got a history of activity and we understand what that noise situation is.
Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
Tab.
Thank you, Chair. So committee has decided to defer this application to a later date to allow them to attend the site. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, the chairs. I can't hear the chairs.
I know it's because I've not switched my microphone on. There's an update on your addendum. Ian's going to present the item. I've one registered speaker, the objector, David Greenwood. Can you hear and speak, David? David? No? He's on mute. You need to unmute yourself, David. Yes, we can now. Okay. What am I up to now? Adele, Ian, I was saying Adele. Ian, present the report.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of a building comprising 7 affordable apartments with associated communal open space, car parking spaces, vehicle and manoeuvring space, bin and cycle stores, and the creation of replacement car parking spaces to serve the public house. The application site comprises the car park to the Alison Arms public house and is located within a tract of development extending southward from Coppull along Preston Road and is in the Greenbelt. The application site is previously developed land. The framework and local plan allow for the redevelopment of such sites for affordable housing on the proviso that the development would not cause substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. The site is located within a substantially built-up tract of development along Preston Road, which itself detracts from openness. The site itself is a gap within this built form, which is largely screened by development in both directions, either side of the site. As such, the visual impact on openness would result in less than substantial harm to the openness of the Greenbelt, and on this basis would not constitute inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. The application site is highly prominent from the A49 Preston Road, where the development has been designed to fit in with the scale and positioning of existing buildings along this highway, and to create an active street frontage with car parking kept to the rear of the site. The building will be of a simple domestic design and would have a scale and form similar to that of nearby terraces. As such, the development would result in a harmonious addition to the street scene. The proposed dwellings would meet the council's interface guidelines and would result in no unacceptable detrimental impacts on residential amenity. There would be a slight over-provision of parking spaces to the apartments, while 17 parking spaces would be retained for the public house. LCC Highways have assessed the scheme and raised no objection. It's therefore considered that the proposed development would not have a significant impact on highway safety, capacity or amenity in the immediate vicinity of the site. There are no ecological concerns in relation to this site, and the site isn't in an area of flood risk. Overall, the development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the addendum and the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, David, would you like to speak now?
Yes, in general, there's no majority car parking that have been introduced on Glover Road. There's supposed to be a new 10-bay car park at the Glover Road side of the pub. This is where we park at the moment. Us being from 263 to 273 Preston Road. And the manoeuvring of the vehicles for the pub facility car park would block the road actually, so we wouldn't be able to park there. So it's purely and simply that small part of the application that I'm objecting to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, over to you, members. Councillor Whitaker.
Thanks, Chair. I was looking just on what the resident was talking about there. It talks about replacing the car parking spaces for the pub within the site. It doesn't say how many car parking spaces, or I haven't said how many car parking spaces are going to be provided for the new apartments. Is there, I know Ian referred to some of it, but I didn't quite follow it all in, but forgive me for that. I just need to get clarified. We're replacing car parking spaces adjacent to the pub. Might be near where Glover Road is, I don't know, but how many places are we running for the residents on these apartments?
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, so it's there would be 17 spaces retained for the public house. 10 of those will be accessed from Glover Road, and the remaining ones will be accessed from Preston Road, as they are currently. Now, the apartments would have 11 parking spaces. They'd be situated to the rear of the apartment building and accessed from Preston Road through a flyover underneath part of the apartment. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, could I just clarify what Ian said? So the 17 spaces are going to be accessible from Glover Road. They're not going to be on Glover Road.
Sorry, through you again, Chair. 10 of those 17 spaces would be accessed from Glover Road. Seven of those spaces would be accessed from Preston Road, and then the apartment spaces will be accessed separately, but also from Preston Road.
So the residents' concerns about having restrictions on Glover Road are not realistic.
Yeah, through you, Chair. At present, on-street parking is freely available on Glover Road. In order to install the 10 spaces adjacent to the public house, if there were cars parked in those spaces and people decided to park along Glover Road in the area of those spaces, then they would be blocking them in. So potentially it would take out that area of on-street parking on that part of Glover Road to the equivalent of 3 or 4 cars probably. Yeah, sorry, through you, Chair. On the slides, there is a layout that does show the parking arrangement, so that should make it clear. Thanks, Chair.
Page 127. Okay. I've got Councillor G, Councillor Morwood, Councillor Hilton, and Councillor Boardman. Councillor G.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to say I am concerned about the parking on here. This is one of my concerns. We have, in the past, rejected developments on pubs because of the lack of parking for the public house. You got one question. You got 17 spaces for the public house. Is that within guidelines for public houses, the 17 spaces? Is that within it? The other question is, I just the layout of the parking in there it just seems haphazard. It just seems wrong. And to say that there's off-street parking, it's a very busy road, that, and you can't say, yes, we can have off-street parking as part of for a pub. We shouldn't be looking at off-street parking. We should be looking at taking cars off the road into the car park. So my main concern is the parking. Is there enough parking for the public house? And if I can see friction between the public house and the development. I have to say I'm nothing against the development. I'm quite happy with that. It's just I'm very concerned about the parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm basically quite happy with this. And if you look at the plan, yeah, there's 10 right on the edge of Glover Road, which will restrict the parking on the opposite side. In fact, you won't be able to park on the opposite side. And yeah, that will be an inconvenience to the residents. It's basically an infill as far as I can see. And it's good that we've got affordable homes and there's plenty of parking for that. That should be fine. It is going to create some friction. I agree. But on the whole, I think I'll go with the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I know this area quite well. Glover Road is a quiet residential road. Fair enough, it is just off the A49, but as soon as you go down there, it is quite peaceful and quiet. And I'm just concerned about putting parking spaces accessing from Glover Road for the parking reasons that people have already mentioned. But I'm also concerned about the amenity for local residents in terms of noise. If you've got people coming out to the pub at closing time, I think there will be a significant amount of noise to people going to their cars on a quiet residential road. We do need to balance this, though, in terms of the fact that this is affordable housing, which is in short supply in parts of the area. This, I believe, is going to a housing association, probably aimed at affordable rent. So, in terms of the development in that respect, I'm quite in favour of it. I do have concerns about the amenity to the local residents, and it's a fine balance. In terms of the openness of the green belts, I do think that there will be a slight detriment to that. I was driving past the area today and I looked over at it and you can see all the way up to Winter Hill there. It's a really beautiful view, but it's the weight that you put on that when we're talking about affordable housing in that area as well. So I'm a little bit torn on this one. I do really have some concerns about the amenity for the local residents, but I think we need to balance that in terms of affordable homes at the same time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, in principle, I've no issues at all with the actual development and the delivery of 7 affordable homes. However, I'm just going to refer you to paragraph 42 in the agenda. LCC Highway Services consider the parking levels to be provided serving the public house and consider these to be reasonable and raise no objections. I don't agree with that at all. 17 car parking spaces for a very large public house, 5 of which is probably taken up by staff. That's 12 car parking spaces. On my adding up of the car parking spaces currently on site, there's around about 36 with space to spare. So in principle, I've no problem with the infill. I've no problem with the apartments. I do have an issue with the 17 car parking spaces for the pub. I think if people won't be able to park at the pub, they won't go, and it'll be the end of the pub. Now, and the development will come forward on that land. I'm also surprised that LCC haven't considered the fact that the car parking spaces are directly accessed off Glover Road, and they're not accessed through an entrance. They're accessed directly off the highway. And 2 of those car parking spaces are literally within 5 metres of the junction. So if a vehicle is reversing off those N2 bays, there is a potential hazard for people turning off the main road, Glover Road. I'd be seriously concerned about those 2 car parking spaces. I think that what they've done is they've squeezed them on so they can get 10. I think in reality they'll probably get 7. So I'm very concerned about that. So I won't be voting for this based on the car parking, and I would move to refuse the application, I'm afraid, or at a minimum alter the car parking provision in the entrance.
Okay. Okay, just Adele, and then I've got Councillor G and Councillor Grant.
Councillor Boardman, no doubt you'll be expecting my question from you. Can you just clarify your reason for refusal? Is it a under provision of car parking spaces and a potential highway safety matter with conflicting manoeuvres? And you're relying on which policy of the development plan?
I can never remember off the top of my head.
It's usually the same one.
BNE1 by any
Yes,
chance?
yes,
Adele?
that's fine, thank you.
I would like to move the refusal based on both of those.
SC4 as well.
And ST4. Thank you for prompting me. It was tip of my tongue, Adele, as you know.
I've got Councillor G, Councillor France, Councillor Whitaker. Councillor G.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'd like to second that. We did refuse, which I said previously, an application. I think it was the Acton Mills. It was in Acton anyway, because of car parking, the lack of car parking, and it was a great concern. So I totally agree that I personally think the car park is inadequate. I do think it's dangerous. So I'm more than happy to second the Council Boardman's recommendation.
Yeah, Adele, you want.
Yeah, it is incumbent on me to actually give you information on that application that Councillor G referred to. It was a site in Exton. It was the Railway Public House. Committee refused it and we lost the appeal. I just want to make you aware of that. Thank you.
Okay. I've got some people waiting to speak though. I'll bring you in at the end. Councillor France.
Yeah, I like the idea of the affordable housing, but again, I was sort of concerned about the parking, so I will be supporting Councillor Boardman.
Councillor Whitaker.
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at the picture of Glover Road, I think, and the side of the Alison Arms. And I just wanted to clarify what Ian was saying. Is the access straight off Glover Road onto that green grass verge? Those are where they're going to be the parking spaces. So that would prevent anybody from parking in front of there, is what you were saying. I'm a bit worried about that. Thank you, Chair.
I've got Councillor Heaton, then Councillor Boardman again.
Thanks, Chair. I'm probably one of the people who's more familiar with this place than most of you, as I did in the past frequent it on numerous occasions. I'm 58. You've got its provision in Chisnall. I thought Chisnall had been abolished now as an area of the council. But anyway, going back to the pub, it's very, very little used at the present time. If you get 17 cars on, it would be an exception. The only time it's busy with cars is when the school is coming out or going in. The people dropping the kids off tend to use the car park to park when I take the kids down to the school just up the road there. I'm not a problem with this. I don't think there's that many cars will be using it, so I'm quite happy to propose we accept the recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just to come back. Railway Public House spaces, so there was considerably more, which is actually what the Alison Arms got now.
So I've had a proposer and a seconder for refusal. I've had a proposal, I've got a seconder for accepting the officer recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Morwood. We're going to vote on the on refusal first. All those in favour of refusal, press your green button. If you're against refusal, your red button. If you don't care, press your yellow button. If you want to abstain. Okay. Figures. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So members
The
have...
names up this time.
Can we put those up?
Could we put them up, please? Thank you. And keep them up. Thank
So
you.
members have decided to refuse the application on the basis of concerns in respect of under provision of car parking spaces and highway safety concerns, contrary to policy BNE1 and SC4. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Item 3H, Blainscough Works, Blainscough Lane, Coppull. Again, we're in Coppull a lot tonight. Adele's going to present this item, and I've no registered speakers. Adele.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the erection of 17 start-up industrial units on approximately half a hectare of land that is located within the Greenbelt. The site is currently used in association with the applicant's vehicle repair shop located on land to the south of the application site. Representations have been received from 3 individuals which are detailed in the report, and a further representation has been received that neither objects or supports the proposal but does raise concerns regarding car parking on Preston Road. No objections have been received from any of the technical consultees and conditions are recommended. Whilst the site has been determined to be previously developed land, it is considered that the proposal would not preserve the openness of the Greenbelt and hence it would amount to inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, albeit this harm would be limited. As I set out earlier this evening, members will be aware that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the Greenbelt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. When considering any planning application, the local planning authority should ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the Greenbelt, and very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm is clearly outweighed by other considerations. In this instance, the applicant has provided evidence to demonstrate the shortfall in availability of and high demand for this size of industrial unit within Coppull and the wider Chorley area. There are also other aspects of this particular site that weigh in favour of the proposal, such as its location adjacent to existing industrial uses, its extensive boundary screening and the existing use as a scrapyard. The proposal would complement other recently approved uses on the wider industrial estate, and the appearance of the site would be improved significantly through the removal of the existing scrap cars which are authorised by reasons of the lawful use of the site and redevelopment into a modern industrial complex. When these aspects are weighed alongside the economic benefits of the proposal in providing much needed start-up units in this part of the borough, they comfortably outweigh the environmental dimension from Greenbelt harm of the proposed industrial units. It's considered, therefore, that very special circumstances do exist in this instance that are sufficient to clearly outweigh the harm that would be caused by reason of inappropriateness, and the proposal is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Hilton.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose officer recommendations here. I think the very special circumstances have been clearly demonstrated.
Councillor G.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second that. It's an area that, it's an industrial area. It needs cleaning up, it needs tidying up, and I think this will be an asset to the area. So I'm happy to second the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Heaton.
I was going to second it, but it's already been done. But can I just suggest we do conditions, that we put a condition on that the road is maintained to a proper condition? Because I've not been down recently, but it's usually full of potholes and breaking edges, and it's a single track road. Parking spaces, passing places, things like this need to be done. I know it's a private road, but I think it should be conditioned.
Do you think we could do that or not? No.
You can't do that.
Adele says no.
Can we suggest to do it then?
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Morwood?
Just quickly, yes. I'm sure they'll, if they want the business to work properly, there'll be a decent road somewhere. But just to clarify, I mean, the mention of cleaning up, we're not granting this permission in order to clean it up, unlike the very first one, which had nothing to do with it. It's just because the special circumstances have been clearly demonstrated, which the first one didn't. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Councillor Derbyshire.
Can I just withdraw my comment that I made earlier about Hetty? I literally couldn't get the right words out of my mouth, and I certainly didn't mean that. Okay, so can I do please just apologise and withdraw that statement? Okay.
Anyone else? If not, I'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the officer recommendation, press the appropriate button. Councillor Hilton, would you mind voting?
I'm sorry.
You're not going yet. Oh. Okay, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So members have unanimously decided to recommend planning permission, grant planning permission, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
It's been a long night and it's not over yet. Okay, moving on to item 3J, Cuerden Valley Park, Shady Lane, Cuerden, pages 167 to 194, with an update on your addendum. Ian's going to present this item. I have registered speakers. I have an objector, Anne Phelan, Parish Councillor Neville Whittam, Ward Councillor Mark Clifford, and the applicant agent Joel Turner. Okay, Anne, Neville, Joel, can you speak and hear?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
Yes,
Anne, yeah. Right, okay. Ian, can you present the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission for the excavation of a trench and the installation of separate surface and foul water drains between Shady Lane and the River Lostock to serve residential development off Nell Lane. Pipeline will be constructed to the eastern side of Shady Lane and will pass through Cuerden Valley Park between Shady Lane and the River Lostock. The foul drain will connect with an existing sewer pipeline, whilst the surface water drain will discharge into the river. The site is located in the Greenbelt, and whilst the proposal amounts to engineering operations are not necessarily an appropriate development within Greenbelt locations, providing that they preserve openness and do not conflict with the purposes of including land in the Greenbelt. The pipelines will be buried and imperceptible once the land has been restored, and therefore no impacts on openness or encroachment would occur. The pipeline itself would have no impact on the appearance of the area once the works are completed. However, there would be some tree loss in carrying out the excavation works. The trees that will be lost have been identified as being of lesser quality and landscape significance, and whilst the mitigation proposed would involve the planting of 70 heavy standard trees close to Shady Lane and the creation of a new woodland between the pipeline and Icehouse Woods within the park itself. This is considered to be an adequate degree of mitigation that would outweigh the impacts of trees to be lost through the development. The ecological impacts of the development can be managed and mitigated through a construction environmental management plan and tree protection plan in addition to further survey works. The impacts on drainage will be managed through conditions attached to the planning permission for the associated residential development, which would require the final details and implementation of an appropriate surface water drainage scheme. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Anne, would you like to speak now?
I'm speaking on behalf of the objectors. Cuerden Valley Park Trust, Guardians of the Green Belt, an organisation that objected to the Redrow application due to the adverse impact on the park, but now apparently prepared to sell the neighbours down the river, prepared to incur more damage and disturbance to the biodiversity of the park they protect, to facilitate a different housing developer with deep pockets. And it's all very disturbing. So let's hope the Trust can assure the public that no strong-arm tactics were used to influence their choice and that it was based purely on the substantial financial incentive offered. We note there is no objection to the environment agents by United Utilities, the latter facing numerous court cases for dumping sewage. I question whether these organisations are fit to be commenting on any planning application. The applicant has opted for underground storage as opposed to the local lead flood authority preference for the use of SUDs. With ever worsening weather and climate considerations, who knows if attenuation tanks will cope? The pipeline is unnecessary and inappropriate. The fragile River Lostock will be subjected to even more pressure from flooding and domestic pollution.
and the loss of more than 50 priceless healthy trees and ancient hedgerows for what? Trees don't need humans to survive and thrive. Humans cannot survive without trees, so it stands to reason, therefore, that this ancient superior species should be given the respect it warrants and must be planted for their own sakes, for the benefit of all life, not as mitigation. I am willing to provide and plant the woodland as described at reference 38, free of charge for Cuerden Park, and tend to it for the rest of my life, should this application be refused. Cuerden Residential Park has many residents approaching the last few years of their life. They signed up to a private, safe, secure and peaceful retirement in idyllic surroundings. Any housing developments would incur years of distress, disturbance, conflicts and complaints. The Redrow application was accepted and will be better tolerated by neighbours. But if this application is approved, which is simply to boost the profits of the landowners and investors, they will experience additional disruption and conflict with the destruction of the natural environment of their boundaries. We can't have the houses without the pipeline. The democratic process is undermined by the actions of central government, who make the rules to suit their own purposes. Their current agenda of boosting housing supply is causing pandemonium. The more we understand about our world, the faster we need to change our outdated ideas and legislation on what is acceptable development. Everyone here tonight is in the same boat. We are more than a tick box exercise. Rather than set a precedent that could see future development around the park impact onto a fragile river system, let's help set a precedent that says to a developer, when there's two options, the one that has the least impact on the environment must be the only option. And let's tilt the balance back in favour of the environment over the economy, as to do anything else endangers the future for all generations.
Could you wind up now, please?
We have the power to prevent more pollution in the seas, poor air quality and loss of priceless biodiversity. In business, there are winners and losers.
You need to wind up now, please.
One is a winner. Thank you.
Thank you. Neville, would you like to speak now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Neville Wheelton, Cuerden Parish Council, objecting. The majority of Cuerden Valley Park, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Hello?
We can hear you. Yeah.
That's all right. I thought there was a glitch. 11 developers to excavate a trench across Greenbelt within the park sets a dangerous precedent and will likely encourage other attempts at overthrowing protection given through the Chorley Local Plan, BNE 1, ENF 9, 10 and 11. Under the National Planning Policy Framework 147, this is inappropriate development, harmful to the Greenbelt and should not be approved. There are no very special circumstances demonstrated. The Access to Neighbouring Land Act 1992 could have created a less harmful solution, joining pipelines to an existing network on the Redrow estate, proving that there is no legitimate need. Playing down the value of mature trees that have TPOs, which seemingly get in the way of development, is abhorrent. The River Lostock is renowned for bursting its banks, flooding proof of which is freely available through Google. We feel that it would be an act of negligence to discharge large quantities of contaminated surface water into the River Lostock, especially during extremes of weather caused by climate changes. Kicking the can down the road by creating additional burdens downstream for other local authorities to deal with is unacceptable. Increased erosion to the riverbanks and landscapes, plus likely pollution, will be exacerbated by this negligent action, let alone the dangers to the ecology and wildlife. We are extremely disappointed with the custodians of the Greenbelt at Cuerden Valley Park, complicit in the dash for cash way in which they have acted. This has undermined local democracy, allowing developers to manipulate the planning process, bringing about the likely destruction of the beautiful Nell Lane, which also is deplorable. Approximately 240 letters of objection and 192 names on a petition were delivered to the planning office. But several hundred more people have expressed the revulsion to us of these plans from 4 housing estates in Clayton Woods. these plans are about as popular as the pandemic. The planning office doesn't always get it right, which is why the members of this committee have to rely on local knowledge and feedback from the community to deliberate on the outcome. To quote Chorley's Rural Communities Champion, if planning was such an exact science, there wouldn't be any need for a planning committee. Greenbelt is there to protect against urban sprawl, not facilitate a large payout to land custodians with increased urban sprawl. After paying lip service at the climate change conference, here we are being seen to be throwing COP26 under a bus by felling many trees, exacerbating flood damage, removing hedgerows, removing ecological habitats.
Can you wind up now, Neville?
Notwithstanding the office's recommendation on this matter, I implore committee members to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chair.
I hope you're better time
Members
keep.
of the Planning Committee, I'm here to object to this planning application in the strongest terms. I will start with reading out the final sentence written on the Cuerden Valley Park public website. The Trust did not make the current application for planning permission for the proposed pipeline and does not support it. A rather damning sentence, would you not say? For clarification, I am speaking as a ward councillor and the council's green champion for environment and green space, not a director of Cuerden Valley Park Trust. As you will have heard from the excellent representations just made, these planned engineering works will have a serious detrimental and environmental impact to a designated and mapped wildlife corridor, but especially to the River Lostock, due to the surface water drainage outpouring into it, which will result in severe loss of riparian habitat through excessive water flow downstream of the proposed outfall pipe. The planning application before you does not take in effect of what happens to all of the surface water drainage from surrounding developments which have been already passed by this council and are currently being built upstream. It is a disaster in the making. I take great exception to the statement in the application that the site lies within flood zone 1 and therefore has a less than 1 in 1,000 annual probability of flooding. If I was a betting man, I'd put £1,000 on these odds. Wow, I'd be a millionaire this time next year, as Delboy used to say. The River Lostock is in fact flooding massively several times a year due to excessive development compounded by climate change, resulting in the natural riparian habitat being destroyed. And this is before adding more water to a river known for flooding. There is a huge amount of evidence supplied in the objections to this application, and a quick look online by anyone shows dramatic footage of bridges within the park being swamped and damaged because of floodwater and severe damage to the wider surrounding environment, including disastrous erosion of riverbanks and the nearby footpaths. This application is ill-conceived, and this application does not mention, as pointed out by Councillor Neville Whittam, there is already existing foul and surface water connections on the neighbouring housing site that this application has been prepared for. These drain to the west and not east through Cuerden Valley Park. What's more, further upstream, there is a planning application for 250 homes on Town Lane that, if allowed on appeal, will add to even more dangerous flooding of the River Lostock, as that surface drainage will once again be directed into the river. In short, it is my personal belief this application is only here before us to save a developer cash by using an alternative drainage route, as they refuse to pay for usage of existing pipework. This greed will result in ever-increasing flooding events to the River Lostock, the loss of vital natural habitat for wildlife, the destruction of infrastructure within Cuerden Valley Park, and also bringing destruction to many communities downstream. I wonder what our neighbours in South Ribble think about all of this. I certainly hope members are minded to refuse this application on hearing submissions and reading evidence from hundreds of knowledgeable residents. However, following the all-out elections in May this year, we have several new members to this planning committee, and it is my view that members who are maybe unsure would benefit from visiting Cuerden Valley Park to see how the riverbanks are already being massively eroded by flooding events and see for yourselves how the wildlife, flora and fauna is being destroyed. I will therefore ask members to defer a decision tonight and come and see the destruction already occurring for yourself. I would hope members agree with this suggestion. However, if this is not agreeable to the committee and members are minded to press on and approve these plans, I ask for two things. I formally request that there is a name vote taken for this most important of planning decisions to an area of vitally important greenbelt. Secondly, a condition be applied known as a Grampian condition, where all off-site work must be completed before any groundwork is broken on land that is not owned by the applicant. Members, I ask you to refuse this ridiculous and frankly scandalous planning application. If you are unsure at all, please vote to defer for the site visit. Thank you, Chair and members, for your time.
Joel, would you like to speak now, please?
Chair and members of the committee, we would like to thank you for the opportunity to present our case in relation to the drainage pipeline at Cuerden Valley Park. I confirm that we've read the officer's report and recommendation and wish to set out our case in support of the application. The application proposes the provision of a foul and surface water drainage pipeline from Nell Lane, with the lower half of the pipeline going through Cuerden Valley Park. The pipeline will service the allocated and now approved housing development on Nell Lane. We acknowledge that this is the third application for the proposed development, with the first two applications either being refused or withdrawn in relation to the impact of development on trees. However, this further application has sought to address this issue in detail, with landscape mitigation plans provided to secure the retention of additional trees from the applications previously evaluated, and the planting of a significant number of new trees, including nearly 1,800 trees within a new woodland within the park. It is noted that officers, including the tree officer, is now in support of this application, and as such, we believe the previous reason for refusal has now been addressed in detail. It's important to acknowledge that the development subject to this application is an engineering operation, which is an acceptable form of development in the Greenbelt. The development will not be visible from past use by the general public, with this part of the site closed off from general use. The development will not result in any detrimental visual impacts to the local area or parkland setting, and given the extensive planting now proposed, will in fact represent an enhancement of the park. The development will assist the delivery of an allocated housing site, which has now been the subject of an approval on appeal. The development will also result in environmental benefits for the site, including biodiversity gains and other ecological enhancements. Whilst it is noted that residents and Ward Councillor have specific concerns in relation to the issue of flooding, we would advise that both United Utilities and the Environment Agency have raised no objection to the application. Further, the planting of almost 2,000 additional trees within the park should also assist in managing surface water, and the drainage system will be designed to hold back water in times of deluge or release at a later time. The funds the park will receive directly as a result of this development will also help the wider site enhancement and site management, and will allow the park to enhance their current offer to the local community. Given the importance we have all placed on the access to open space and parkland over the last 2 years, the positive benefits these investments will make for the wider community is likely to be extensive. In short, the application has addressed the earlier concerns raised by the council in relation to the impact of the pipeline on trees, will support the delivery of an allocated and approved housing site, is an acceptable form of development within the Greenbelt, and will have no detrimental impacts on the local environment. In fact, given the significant mitigation planting proposed, the scheme will result in significant environmental gains within the park. There have been no statutory consultee objections, and all other matters can now be addressed by way of condition. We would therefore kindly request that members carefully consider the merits of the proposed development and support the recommendation by your officers and seek to approve this application subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move over to members, as you've noticed throughout Councillor Clifford, all our votes are recorded at the moment because you can see how everybody's votes, so we don't using the new system. Okay, members, over to you. I've got Councillor Hilton, Councillor Nevitt wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that there are some, well, the applicants put forward some mitigations. Sorry, yeah, I'll move closer to the microphone. Is that better? I appreciate the fact that there are some mitigations for some of the environmental damage that's going to happen here, but those are going to take a generation to actually come through. We're talking about chopping down mature trees, an ancient hedgerow. the immediate loss of the environment there and the impact on biodiversity is significant. And you cannot mitigate for that straight away. That is going to take a generation to actually even start to mitigate chopping these things down and destroying these habitats. Climate change is a very real issue right now, and this council has pledged to help as best we can by declaring a climate emergency. So chopping down these trees is not the answer. Unfortunately, I can't agree with office recommendations on this one, so I'd actually like to move for refusal, and I just want to be quite clear why, so I've written this down, so please bear with me. So the first reason, the proposed development would result in the loss of trees and hedgerow, which make a valuable contribution to the character of the landscape, and it's not outweighed by the benefits of development contrary to BNE 10 of the Chorley local plan. Due to the rural tree-lined character as well, we need to think about the character of the area. I think that's essential as well. Due to the rural tree-lined character of Shady Lane, which provides a high level of public amenity, the loss of trees would be harmful to the character of the lane and the locality, and therefore it's contrary to policy BNE 1 of the Chorley local plan. So I'd like to move for refusal for those reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hilton. I've got Councillor Neville, Councillor Whittaker, Councillor Cullins. Councillor Neville.
Councillor Neville, you mean? Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank everyone for our representations that we've just heard. But I'd like to correct some of the statements that the applicant just made. Firstly, in suggesting that the tree officer is in favour of this application, that is technically not correct. The tree officer has, quite rightly, made their report, and you'll see from paragraph 43, they've concluded that there is more of a that the positive aspects of this outweigh the harm caused. That does not mean the tree officer is in favour of this application. And secondly, the idea of, quote, that there would be no detrimental impact from this application. Again, I just refer to the report, whether it's paragraph 43 or you'll see it throughout, that there are clear detrimental impacts. It's whether there is, this committee believes that the positives outweigh those negatives. The officer in charge of this application said at the start, you know, once land has been restored in this case, you know, looking at the damage this is going to cause to the greenbelt, it's absolutely catastrophic. And to suggest that land can be restored almost overnight is an absolute fallacy, to be honest. I'd be very, very concerned if this was passed about the impact on land. To give credit to the applicant, you know, applying the cunning semantics of trench as part of their application suggests that this is actually quite an innocent proposal of minimal effect on Cuerden Valley, when, of course, the evidence that we've seen tonight proves the contrary. In fact, it would depth charge the revered dignity of this beautiful park, which I'd follow up on Councillor Clifford's suggestion that all officers and members present tonight should try and visit whenever possible. So I'd second Councillor Hilton's proposal that we reject officers' recommendations. And once again, I'd say to all members, please do visit while we've got this husbanded, beautiful asset available to us. It's clearly, you know, we have to take care of it. And if the wrong decisions are made, we could lose that. So let's cherish it while we still got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whittaker.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with the proposal to refuse, and it'd be interesting to see what that goes, but perhaps I can give notice of I also support later on, if it's not refused, proposal for a site visit we can have a look at. I'm a bit concerned about this because about 2 years ago we went on a site visit down Nell Lane, and the planning application that we correctly, in my view, refused was overturned, and it's referred to later on in the agenda. And then almost within 3 weeks of that being refused, we get an application in here to do a trench which I agree, and I've seen the videos of the flooding that's occurred down there. The applicant says United Utilities don't object. Well, they never do. So it's not really a matter of that. I think there's a significant environmental issues here, and I don't think I've seen as many objections made to an environmental issue like this as are listed there on paragraph 6. So I'll vote for the refusal, Chair, and I'll give you notice that I might have another amendment after this. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Normally sitting across the chamber from Mark, it pains me greatly tonight to say that I concur with every word he said. I think it's on the environmental side, it's disgraceful. We'll remove 50 trees, some with TPOs, and plant 20. Move 50 to 80 metres of ancient hedgerows. That's not exactly a small amount. And again, as Councillor Hilton said, these trees will take years, generations to come back to do what they're doing now. I have paddled through the River Lostock on many an occasion, either with brownies or with a dog, and it does tend to flood on a regular basis, not always as bad as in 2015, but it does flood. And whether they can hold the water back, water finds its own way out. And I just think it's the new woodland, it's just a red herring. Because that again, unless they're going to plant 60-year-old oaks, it's going to take years to come back. And again, I will be voting against it.
Okay. Anyone else wish to comment, or should I move to the vote? Okay. So I have a proposer and a seconder to refuse this planning application as outlined by Councillor Hilton. All those in favour of refusal, please show no. Can we have the okay.
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to refuse planning permission for the following reasons. The proposed development will result in the loss of trees and hedgerow, which makes a valuable contribution to the character of the landscape and is not outweighed by the benefits of the development contrary to policy BNE 10 of the Chorley local plan. Due to the rural tree-lined character of Shady Lane, which provides a higher level of amenity, the loss of trees would be harmful to the character of the lane and locality contrary to policy BNE 1 of the Chorley local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to 3A. So Councillor Hilton. He's a man of a certain age. Yes, yeah, you can go. Pardon?
Yeah, it's coming back.
I think we're better. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, we'll wait for Councillor G to come back. It's the kindest thing to do. He's a man of a certain age. Okay, item 3A, land to the rear of Spinners Close Coppull, pages 5 to 42, with an update on your addendum. Ian's going to present this item, and I have one registered speaker, Councillor Holgate. Can you speak and hear us, Steve?
I can do that, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Ian, can you present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Please.
This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 2 buildings comprising 4 apartments and 2 bungalows with associated parking and landscaping. The site's located to the rear of 13 to 16 Spinners Close in Coppull and is situated between these dwellings and a mill pond or lodge. It comprises part of an area of designated public open space of semi-natural typology, which is also part of a biological heritage site. The site itself is a gravelled surfaced area with some trees and scrub to the southern part. The proposed development will result in a reduction in the area of the available public open space and will result in the loss of 2 mature trees and an area of scrub. It is proposed that the remaining area of the public open space is improved to compensate for the loss in area and any associated biodiversity impacts. Given that the site area makes up only a small proportion of the overall open space and comprises hard standing and some trees of lesser value, it is considered that the loss of this area will be acceptable subject to appropriate landscaping of the development site and the improvement of the remaining area of public open space. The proposed development will result in a more formal urban appearance to the west side of the pond, whilst the buildings will be of modest scale and would have an active frontage facing the pond. Along with the appropriate landscaping and the improvement works to the open space, there will be no unacceptable impact on the character of the area. It's noted that the application site is located at a higher level to the dwellings at Spinners Close, and properties on Spinners Close would have rear elevations and gardens immediately to the rear of the site. The proposed buildings will be located at least 20 metres from the dwellings at Spinners Close and have been designed in such a way as to avoid parallel facing windows. Given that the relative positioning and degree of separation, it's considered that there will be no unacceptable impact on amenity. In relation to biodiversity impacts, the development the development would be limited to a reduction in the area of the biological habitat and might result in a potential for fragmentation. The proposed mitigation works have demonstrated that a biodiversity net gain of 50% can be achieved, which has been considered and corroborated by the Council's ecology advisors. This would include enhancements of the retained woodland in and adjacent to the site, as well as the management of newly created wildflower grassland, with additional biodiversity enhancements provided through the installation of bird and bat boxes and brash piles for hedgehogs. LCC Highways have assessed the scheme and are of the opinion that the proposed development would not have a significant impact on highway safety, capacity or amenity in the immediate vicinity of the site, following amendments to the access and subject to conditions. There are no heritage concerns in relation to nearby listed buildings, and the site is not in an area of flood risk. Overall, the proposed development is considered to be in accordance with the policies of the development plan and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holgate, do you want to speak now, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This particular project and application is to be sat tooth by jowl with a really sensitive and valued biological heritage site as described in the report. As I was listening to the report and the introduction by Ian, I was really heartened by the fact that it pretty much mirrored the position that we were just discussing at the previous application. So to find that the application was recommended for approval is really quite astonishing. And I think that given the true value of this particular heritage site and the biodiversity that it contains, I think it would be criminal to approve this application. The potential increase in biodiversity in terms of planting a few extra trees and creating a small woodland does go nowhere near what's required to that will be lost due to this particular development proposal. On many occasions in the past, I've felt completely justified in wishing and asking members to oppose a planning application that clearly has a damaging effect on very sensitive natural reserve sites, and for this to be a biological heritage site being impinged upon is in my view totally unacceptable. I'm about to disappear off the screen now because unlike on previous occasions, I've got a form of words prepared in order to back up the committee's opportunity to refuse this planning application. So with that, I will just switch to my emails. And the words are as such: rear of Spinners Close. Proposed development would result in the partial loss of an area of public open space as designated by policy HW2 of the Chorley Local Plan 2012 to 2026, and would worsen an existing deficit of natural stroke semi-rural grassland green space in Coppull, whilst the development would be harmful to the visual amenity provided by the site, which would be detrimental to the character of the area and contrary to policy HW2 of the Chorley Local Plan 2012 to 2026. The proposed development would result in the loss of trees and woodland, which make a valuable contribution to the character of the landscape and setting of the mill pond, and is not outweighed by the benefits of the development, contrary to policy BNE 10 of the Chorley Local Plan 2012 to 2026. The proposed development would result in the loss of part of a biological heritage site and connectivity across the site, contrary to policy BNE 9 of the Chorley Local Plan 2012-2026. Sorry that was such a long...
Please don't.
No, I certainly won't. I don't think I need to. I think the case is well made. I've taken good advice on this, and I do hope that the Planning Committee will decline the application. If the applicant wants to appeal, then let the government inspector make the decision on another loss of our very valuable and diminishing wildlife sites that we've got in the area. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Holgate. Over to you, members. Councillor Morwood.
Thank you, Chair. Well, certainly Councillor Holgate's done his homework. I'm very impressed. But he's right. It's really not that long ago that we had similar concerns in an area of open, public open space around Preston, and we voted against that. And so likewise, this development, I do think, will result in a partial loss of public open space. And it may be the loss of a few trees, but the loss of any mature trees is too many. So I'm happy with what was stated by Councillor Holgate there, that policy. And it is, I mean, you're losing part of that lakeside. I mean, a biological heritage area, and we're going to take a chunk out of it. No, there's, I don't often vote against recommendations, but in this case, I would recommend we refuse the application. Thank you.
Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the contrary, for me, I'm afraid, I've read through the officer's report in detail and picked out a couple of points, and I think the report is correct. It's very finely balanced. As in, you know, is it more beneficial to have two affordable bungalows and 4 apartments, or is it more beneficial to preserve the existing habitat and open space that's there? The report makes it clear that there is an over allocation of public open space in the area, and therefore the weight is that it's justified. I'm just trying to find that paragraph. Paragraph 84, surplus of provision in Coppull in relation to this standard, and therefore a contribution towards provision is not required. That's to do with the contribution to the open space, isn't it? I don't I don't have so much of an issue. I think the developer has put a proposal together which is of low impact. They have gone for bungalows, noting that the site is higher than those on Spinners Close. I also note that the entire site has been recently developed over the past 20 years. Spinners Close also being a relatively new development. So it's a significantly built up area. Yes, we do have a heritage asset there, which is the mill. The mill, I think, is unaffected, as it states in the report. And I'd move to support the officer's recommendation on this one for approval.
Councillor France.
I'd just like to second Councillor Morwood for refusal.
Okay. Councillor Neville.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd side with Councillor Morwood and Councillor France on that one. Looking at page 31, sorry, when we're looking at the view of the site from across the pond, I think even from that, it doesn't take too much, imaginative license to realise the impact this is going to have on this natural asset. You can imagine, looking at that picture, that at least half of those trees are going to be felled by this proposal. And to be frank, that is not going to be made up by any offset in terms of planting new trees. And just looking at page 25, the site plan, it's quite clear from that trees along the water's edge, which were apparent from page 31, have clearly been cut down to make way for this proposal. So to be frank, it's going to be sterilising this natural open space that is currently used by all local residents of that area. Ian said at the start, it's only accounting for a small amount of open space in this area. Well, that's because most of the open space is a pond. So, most people they're not going to be walking through that, or at least I should hope they're not. I know Ian said that, this development would be, the elevations would be above those of Spinners Close. That this would somehow not have a detrimental impact on the amenity. On the contrary, I do think it would. I know because of the current trees there that those properties might not have a clear view out towards this pond, but if we permit this application, they definitely won't. Just off the back of what Councillor Boardman said there, in terms of surplus supply of open space in Coppull, I don't think the local residents would call this surplus supply. I think we can see from the pictures on page 29, we've got new developments in this area. The families we're going to be welcoming to Coppull are probably looking forward to this asset right on their doorstep, only for it to be taken away as soon as they move in. I don't want us to permit overdevelopment. That's why I'd be minded for refusal. Thank you.
Yes, I think we're focusing too much on trees at this meeting. I think we should be looking at the development of the officer's recommendation and the reports. On this one, I have to agree with the officers. I think what there is a loss of, there is a gain by obviously the apartments and 2 bungalows which are in short supply in most areas. So I'll second Councillor Boardman with the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm mindful that Councillor Morwood moved refusal based on some of the suggested reasons that had been advanced by Councillor Holgate when he addressed committee. And just for the public record and for the legal officers to make a note of, I actually made a note of 3 reasons for refusal. The first, on the grounds that the proposal will result in the partial loss of an area of public open space which is designated by policy HW2 of the local plan, and that consequently would worsen an existing situation with regard to a deficit of particular typology of open space, namely that natural and semi-natural green space, and therefore would be harmful to visual amenity and detrimental to the character of the area. Second reason related to the loss of the woodland that make a valuable contribution to the landscape, and again on the grounds it's contrary to policy BNE 10 of the local plan. And the third reason was in connection with the loss of a biological heritage site and the connectivity to the wider site area, and therefore that was contrary to policy BNE 9. I don't want to put words in Councillor Morwood's mouth, but I'm assuming that was on the basis that he advanced the reason
Councillor
for
Morwood.
refusal. I'm also...
Councillor Morwood.
Yeah, just the last bit, loss of part of it. I mean, I think you said originally the loss of, well, I seem to imply the whole thing, but part of the biological heritage site, yes.
Partial loss,
And I'm mindful that Councillor Nevitt raised another issue in terms of the potential impacts on outlook from existing properties. I don't know whether that forms part of Councillor Morwood's reason for refusal, or whether you were happy with the assessment in the officer's report in terms of impacts on outlook. Just to remind officers, then people are not entitled to a view across somebody else's land. So the relationship and the juxtaposition of the proposed buildings and the consequential impact was considered to be acceptable in the officer's report. Obviously, it's open to members to come to a different conclusion, but just for the record, I need to understand whether that is a reason for refusal at this time.
Through you, Chair, can I just come in there? Given that Councillor Morwood has already obviously made a proposal with the actual reasons and it's been seconded, the additional reason would have to be obviously given as an additional proposal. You can't have that as an addition afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for clarification, I'm seconding the reasons for refusal that Councillor Morwood made. I'm not making a separate reason for refusal. Thanks.
So I have a proposer and a seconder for refusal proposal and a seconder for the officer recommendation. All those in favour of refusal, please vote.
No.
Okay. Okay, Taz.
Thank you, Chair. So members have decided to refuse the application, and that's on the basis of Councillor Morwood's reasons that were given quite clearly. So yeah, that's the decision of the committee, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nearly there. Item 4, the appeals report, pages 195 to 198. Adele, do you want to comment on anything?
Only to state the obvious, it's a very long list. We've had a significant number of appeals lodged very recently. And I would just draw your attention to a couple of the appeal decisions on the second half of the report, if you like, particularly with reference to the appeal at Quicksave and the appeal at Oak Drive in Chorley. Both of those were refused contrary to officer recommendation, and both appeals have been allowed. There are still quite a lot of appeals that we're waiting for decisions on, and you know, if there's any movement on some of the key decisions, then obviously I will update members at that time rather than waiting for.
Councillor G.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just looking at the excuse me, Oak Drive appeal for 10 apartments. We had a meeting where he reduced down to 8. So I presume now that he goes back to 10.
Yeah.
It's open to the applicant essentially which scheme they choose to implement. It's open. Yeah, they could do one or the other.
Councillor Whittaker.
I wonder if Adele could just give us in 2 sentences why the application that we refused in Nell Lane was approved.
That's what the officer does.
I don't think I can do it in 2 sentences, to be honest. I think what I think would be helpful for members is if I circulate that decision letter so you can read it in its entirety.
Be grateful, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I have no urgent business. Thank you all. We've done very